And I just thought, you know what, let me actually think about what I actually want to do and stop trying to tick boxes and be like everyone else. And I thought I like the idea of building stuff and really big infrastructure projects. I did move to tech for a short while, but fundamentally, like, I've always loved this idea of big infrastructure and the impact it can have, and particularly if it can decarbonise and impact on climate change. So this was very much in line with that. Renewable energy is actually really cheap. And of course, there's loads of sun, there's loads of wind. We don't have a shortage of renewable energy. The biggest challenge you have is, how do I get that electricity to where I need it? So what we're doing basically is saying, screw the electricity grid. We're going to produce this fuel by simply turning that electricity into fuel at source.
Today on the podcast, we have Lara Naqushbandi, who's the CEO and co-founder of ETFuels. They're a green fuels producer. They're seeking to decarbonise the shipping industry. Lara's got an incredible story, from wanting to be a doctor growing up, to going into the finance industry, to going into the mining industry, with an MBA in between that, then working at Google, and then giving that all up to follow her purpose and to try to make a difference to the climate. It's a really interesting story to see how she's been able to be a leader at different organisations and then go to a company where it's just her and two co-founders and building that up again from scratch. I hope you enjoy this episode. We're the Bay HQ and I'm Mama, and this episode is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking. So, Lara, what you've done over your career is incredible, but obviously you started from somewhere. So when you were a kid, when you were growing up, what did you want to be?
Well, so I kind of knew what I didn't want to be. So my family, mum and dad, both doctors, and, aunts and uncles, grandparents, everyone, sort of a lot of doctors in the family. And I remember my dad said to me really early on, I was thinking about being a doctor as well. It's an amazing profession, and obviously very highly considered, right, in the Asian community. And I was thinking, I can do this job, help people, have a nice lifestyle. And my dad said to me, if you become a doctor, I won't support you through university. And I just thought, okay, well, fine, I can't be a doctor. So that's kind of,
Why was that?
I think, he'd come over from Kashmir and he'd had to be a medical student because I guess he'd been sort of pressured into doing that. And it was a way to come out of India and to move to the UK. And I think he was really keen that now he'd gotten himself here, that he wanted for his kids to have the ability to choose what they really wanted to do. So it didn't really matter actually that I did actually quite want to be a doctor, but he was like, no,
you don't.
Exactly. So yeah, that's sort of. And then I think, I was always quite into the mix of numbers and words. And so I thought, well, what subject has maths and sort of writing essays? And it's basically economics. So I ended up going into that sort of economics finance route initially.
So I did economics at uni as well, and I remember thinking there'd be a lot more words. It was a lot more maths than I expected. I don't know how you found it.
Yeah, I did too. I sort of got what's the right word, duped into that. But I actually quite like the mix of the two. So yeah, it was a good balance, I think. And I did like at A-levels, I did history, double maths and French, because I didn't really have a clear direction on what I wanted to do, other than I liked a bit of variety and a bit of a mix.
So where you've turned out now, right? So all those kids listening now who are like, they had to argue with their parents about doing history or French. I'm like, look, she did it and look where she is.
Well, look, my dad did say, why are you doing French when we're in England, right? I mean, and I don't actually remember any of the French. But I would say, actually, interestingly, out of all those subjects that I've done, I actually think that the having a diverse set of subjects really did help me, because the reality is I'm not talking about the Second World War or like differential equation. I'm definitely not talking in French, right? But I am having to like write stuff, figure out if we've got any money in the bank. And our business we do occasionally go to, well, it's based in Europe. So we do interact with a lot of Europeans, and so language would have been helpful. But yeah, I think it's really important people have that well-rounded sort of education when they're growing up.
And when you're at university, when you picked economics, did you think you knew what you wanted to do next, or was it you fell into that finance space?
Yeah, so I was definitely quite risk averse, and I just sort of thought, well, what's everyone else doing? And everyone else was doing banking or consulting, and so I was like, fine, I'll just do banking. I just took whatever internship would take me and ended up doing that. I didn't have this like amazing clear vision on this is what I want to do, and I think also because all my family were doctors, I didn't really know what you did if you weren't a doctor, and like how to navigate that whole space, like what's the difference between this bank and that bank, and what's accounting. So I'll just do what everyone else does. I'll apply for a bunch of stuff and see what I get. And I got one thing and I did that.
It's interesting as well, because when people go into these different careers, it might be that your family have got a prestigious job, but it doesn't necessarily help you in the other fields. Because I'm guessing a lot of your parents' friends were probably in the medical field, right? So you didn't have an uncle who did this, who did this, who did this, who could get you a job. And that's sometimes where people lack that external wider view in some ways. In that finance world, so if you stayed there for a little while, did you find you enjoyed it when you started, or how did that journey of like that go?
I guess when you start work, you don't really have a bench. I mean, so I'd done like working as a cashier for Safeways, and then I went to go work in investment banking, right? So like my benchmark was, it was quite wide. Did I enjoy banking? Not really. I mean, come on, really, right? Not really. Mainly because the hours were too long and I had to wake up really early. That's the main reason I didn't enjoy it. I had some amazing friendships out of that, actually. Still in touch with. My best friend came from my internship in banking. And I think while I didn't enjoy it, it was really, sometimes it's really good to just do a really hard, grindy job where, you know, you get sort of beasted for a couple of years and you learn really high service sort of standards, particularly if you're client facing. So I think I didn't enjoy it, but it definitely helped me.
Once you've done that a couple of years, right? And I think a lot of people have that after a couple of years, it starts to get that itch of like, is this where I want to stay? What do I want to do next? What was your path looking at then?
I was just knackered, right? So I did that for 3 years and I was just tired. So I just thought, you know, I have to figure out another path. And so maybe this is a bit of an old school recommendation, but I often recommend people coming out of uni to, if you don't know what you want to do, that's totally fine. Take a job where you're ideally client facing, because those jobs you typically get exposure to a lot of different companies and you learn a certain professional standard and it just helps you get your next thing. And so that was kind of my approach with going into banking was I'll get sort of professional training and then I'll figure out what I really want to do. So did my banking and then I just thought, well, I need to find a way to sort of pivot and take some time out. And I was lucky because I'd earned a bit of money during banking, and so I thought I'll go to business school and take a couple of years to figure out what I want to do. So that's what I did.
And how was business school for you? Because obviously there's a big debate between people. Do you go to business school? Or do you just go and do something else instead? And like just do a job or just found your own company? But do you find that was a really good experience for you?
Well, I always joke. I mean, so I think if you're actually doing something really cool, you wouldn't go to business. You'd actually be doing the thing, right? But I wasn't. I wasn't founding my own, $1 billion company. I was trying to get a bit of a rest after 3 years of banking. Business school was amazing for me because I think I hadn't had the most exciting time at undergrad. I studied in the US, and so I was this really shy English person who went to the US. And if you're shy and English in the States, you're just basically like non-existent, right? So I went to business school, and I'd just done 3 years in banking so I could relax, I could meet friends, and I loved business school. And it actually did help me do that career change. I decided I wanted to go and do something really meaningful and purposeful and take my finance skills and go and apply them for something for the good. And I did that. And enabled by business school through the network, I got a job working at a carbon trading private equity firm, which was sort of a mix of, money stuff, but also helping the climate. And business school enabled that for me. So it was a really good experience.
It's interesting because we've talked a couple of times and you've come across as very confident both times. You're very chatty, very personable. And it's interesting to see when you were at university, you said you were shy and kind of out of the loop of everything. And I think it's good for people to kind of recognize as well that if they're in that place where they feel like, oh, I don't really fit in, or they feel a bit shy, that there is that growth possible too, and that people can adapt and feel more comfortable over time.
Definitely. So I'm an introvert, and I'm still quite awkward now, but definitely my uni days and the first few years coming out of where I was super awkward and I always had confidence in it's going to sound really arrogant, in my intelligence, but not in my social skills or in my, are people going to find me interesting as a person? I don't know if they do, but now I don't care as much. But I think, so what helped me, and it goes back to why I did my first job, I was in sales. I don't know why these people hired. Why would you hire someone like me in sales? Bizarre. But literally all I had to do for the first year and a half was call people up and talk to them. It was literally like going through torture for someone like me. But once you've done that, I mean, we talked about this, once you've done a number of interviews or you get used to it. And so that really helped. And then and the other thing that helped me was, I did business school in America as well. And so again, being in this environment where everyone's so confident and they're always talking, you kind of get toughened. And so I think being in that environment where you have to talk helped. And then I think the second thing that helped was having somebody who actually believed in me at work. And it's such a small thing, but now, I had a boss, two bosses who just gave me confidence that I was a good worker, a good analyst, and I I think so much now now I'm working for like a small startup, it's fine. But like in my corporate career, I used to think about how can I give people confidence? Because it's so easy to say a few words here or there and just transform someone's perspective of themselves. That was really transformative for me.
It's some kind of I'm working on as well, because we've got a very small team, but trying to make sure to keep saying that was good, because you always think about the next thing to do and the problems and, oh, we need to get this done, this done, this done.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, a few words here and there, it doesn't have to be that much, because obviously, but it just means a lot to people. So it's just, it doesn't cost you anything to just be like, oh, that's great. Like, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And they can remember that.
Yeah.
And was that the banking side of things? Was that once you got into the carbon trading?
This was on the banking side. So I had two lady bosses actually. And the first one, she hired me in. She believed in me in the first place, which was amazing. Her name's Christine. And so thank you, Christine, if you're listening to this. But she set really high standards. So you knew if you got a well done from her, it was a genuine well done. And then the second boss I had was a lady called Catalin. And she was amazing because she basically said, I'm going to give you this thing to do and you're going to run with it. And I was like, well, how could I possibly have responsibility for this? But because she believed in me to just give it to me, I felt that I could do it. And both of those experiences were really, really transformative for me.
So you had a couple of years at the carbon trading place, right?
Yeah.
You seem to have really enjoyed that and the mission behind it. What was the next part of your journey?
Yeah, so I love that place because the culture was amazing and the people that worked at that firm, I'm still in touch with so many of them today and they'd built an amazing culture. So the next stage of my journey, so I thought I'm going to go and save the world, do this carbon thing for like 20 years. But then the bottom fell out of the carbon markets. I just thought, you know what, like I need to go back and get like a more traditional job. So I then went to work in private equity and I kind of went back into the whole, what's everyone else doing and what should I be doing and what's going to look good? And so I did that, went into private equity, did that for a year and it wasn't a good fit for me for many reasons. And I just thought, you know what, let me actually think about what I actually want to do and stop trying to tick boxes and be like everyone else. And I thought I like the idea of building stuff and really big infrastructure projects because I've always had this thing where like, what can I do that would be useful? And, you know, I thought education, health, jobs, that kind of thing. And infrastructure and energy and commodities felt like, you know, how do you sort of, it sounds really like, I don't know, really arrogant, but like, so how do you help move countries out of poverty, right? You give them infrastructure. And so I decided to go into work for a mining company because this mining company, Rio Tinto, was doing all these projects, big infrastructure projects in the developing world. I thought that sounds really cool. And it was similar to my carbon trading days, which had been very much in the developing world, infrastructure projects to reduce emissions or to create useful things. So I worked for Rio Tinto for just under a decade.
So at Rio Tinto, you spent a decade there, which is a long time, like considering a lot of people now move jobs every couple of years, wherever it is. So what kept you there for so long?
Yeah, I mean, again, it came down to I had some amazing managers, you know, that gave me opportunities, believed in me, opened doors for me. And the work was really interesting too, you know, like we'd be doing projects all over the world, really big stuff. And I felt big stuff was impactful and I enjoyed being part of this team doing big stuff. So yeah, I didn't expect that I would stay in a mining company. I mean, you know, none of my friends are working for a mining company. They're all doing like cool, sexy stuff like Google and this private equity thing. And I was at a mining company. But it was an amazing experience, an amazing journey. And, you know, what kept me there was just bosses who opened up opportunity after opportunity for me. And, you know, really good teammates. For the most part.
So you said your friends were doing cool stuff like Google, which is obviously what you then went on to go and do.
Yeah, like 20 years too late, yeah.
But it wasn't that, you didn't go into Google because it was cool, did you? Or was that, so what was the reasoning behind that switch?
Yeah, so I'd done commodities for, I don't know, about 15 years at that point. And I'd done a good job of like climbing up the corporate ladder and I'd got quite senior. And I just thought, okay, at this point, I was doing the finance route. And I thought, okay, I can't remember how old, I thought maybe like late 30s. And I thought, well, my route now is going to be a CFO of a mining company. Like, that's literally what I've been training for. And I felt like, you know, I've still got another 20 years of working. This can't be the end for me. I've done a very good job in my career of like being really clear I wanted to get to and then narrowing in on that and just making sure that everything I did was going to get me to that point, which was to be the CFO of a mining company. And then when I saw that as the next role, I just thought, oh, well, like, you know, I need to sort of step back and think about whether there's more to life than just doing this one job for the next 20 years. And so Google found the headhunter found me on LinkedIn, but I just thought this is a great way to something totally different and random and just diversify again, having honed. Now's a chance to do something that will take me into a whole bunch of other options. I didn't expect at the time, but the other thing moving out of mining into Google gave me was just, the mining company was going through some tough times. There were a lot of cost cutting. The culture was challenged at that point. It sort of changed over time. And I didn't realize you'd go and work at a place that was like, really inclusive and diverse. And I know people say that Silicon Valley is not diverse, but it's such a difference from mining, And yeah, I remember going to my interviews at Google and there was like little things on the table saying, here's how you have an inclusive meeting. And I was like, what? Like you have to listen to people. Like you don't have to like be like, I'm here. And, they were just, I remember there were meetings at Google where the whole meeting was filled with women. I was like, how can there be a meeting with just women? Like, what's happening to the world? It was just such an eye-opener for me. And the move out of mining into Google, while I loved infrastructure, it was just such an eye-opener to think, what should a company culture look like? I know Google's gone through some tough times, but for me personally, it was the most incredible place to work.
What did you do at Google then? Because obviously you're saying you're going down that CFO route in the mining world. What was the switch?
Yeah, so I did CFO in the mining world, and then I joined Google as the CFO of the UK business. So I just did the functional switch. I remember someone told me when you change jobs, there's three things you can change: a function, the industry, or the country, and you can't change more than two. And so I was living in Singapore as a finance person in the mining industry. I moved to the UK as a finance person in tech. So I did two of the three changes, basically.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you're even trying to do. HSBC have got the team they've built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hsbcinnovationbanking.com. And so you obviously said your first impressions of Google were incredible and you really enjoyed that journey. What do you think that the mining experience gave you that enabled you to bring a different perspective into Google and have something you added to them? Yeah,
so a couple of things. I think the mining experience toughened me up. So it was quite a punchy environment. And I made a load of mistakes around, how to conduct myself as a leader. I was trying to be a 60-year-old white man and it just didn't work, like 5'3" and just like, so I realized moving to Google that I had to be myself. But also, having worked for sort of just under a decade at a mining company, mostly men, well, nearly all men, right? I knew how to hold my own as well. So that helped. And then I think the discipline of a mining company, right? So Google at the time, it's always growth and possibility and opportunity, whereas a mining company is like, don't kill anyone. We have to deliver this and we have to do it 10% cheaper every year. It's a very different kind of energy. And so I was able to bring some of that discipline into, an organization that, growth was slowing down and we needed a bit more focus and discipline in some areas. So, yeah.
By the time you left Google, right, what was on your mind? What were you thinking about? Like, what was behind your decision to leave?
So what happened? So I was at Google and I had another amazing boss, a guy called Ronan Harris. And, I had two bosses. Both of them were amazing. So my finance boss, James, and my UK boss, Ronan. Ronan had moved me out of finance into going to work for the business. And so that was a really big change for me because I'd been a CFO all my career or a finance person. And now I was finally doing a P&L role, sort of general management. And that was a really big opportunity for me. So I wasn't really looking to leave Google. I had an amazing team. It's an amazing culture. And yeah, it was an exciting opportunity. But there was this nagging thing in me about going back to the purpose and why am I doing all this and how am I having an impact, right? And I was speaking to my boss, Ronan, and I was sort of saying, I really want to do something that's, back in my passion of climate change. And he said, well, why don't you lead the sustainability initiatives for Google in the UK? So I did that. And as part of that, I hired a management consulting firm, to come and help us define, some aspects of the sustainability strategy. Anyway, the guy that I hired, Felix, he basically had come up with this idea for a business in the sustainability space with his colleague, Anthony. So he pitched it to me and I just thought, well, this is an amazing idea. As much as I love Google, this feels very much in line with my purpose. The timing seems good. And I had a bit of a safety net, I made a bit of cash because Google shares have done really well. I thought, now's the time, right? I should try this and see where it takes me. And
how was that decision at the time? Because you've gone from Rio Tinto, massive company, to Google, another massive company, to now starting something from scratch. Was it something which, was it as easy as you sounded there about this is the right decision? Or how is it with the people around you as well? Were people around you like, what are you doing? Like, you're made. Why would you go and do something yourself? Or did you get support from people around you?
The way you say it now, I'm wondering, why did I do it? So what was it? I think a few things. I think one is everyone had just gone through COVID, right? So people did funny things after COVID. So I think my headspace was in, exactly, right? So I think, a lot of people transitioned and maybe it's sort of a subconscious thing, but, everyone rethinking their purpose. So that must have had an impact. Again, I was sort of wondering, I sort of joined Google. The first year or so was really challenging because I'd moved industries and I was learning and growing. And then I guess I thought, well, I feel like I've done well at Google. I've proved it to myself that I can work in mining, I can do private equity, and now I can even do tech. It's an ego thing. I sort of proved it.
It's seeking a new challenge, right?
Yeah, it was sort of the seeking a new challenge. And going back, it was very much in line with, in the day, I did spend most of my career in commodities. I did move to tech for a short while, but fundamentally, I've always loved this idea of big infrastructure and the impact it can have, and particularly if it can decarbonise and impact on climate change. So this was very much in line with that. I think, I hadn't really thought about the challenge of, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur now, right? But I'm not someone who's woken up every day and had a million business ideas and wanted to start something and create something new. But at that particular point, I felt like, I've had enough professional training now. It's been 20 years. I've got to use it for something that I feel passionate about. And my other half, so he's always said to me, follow your purpose. And through his life, he's done an amazing job of just being really centered on what's important and following purpose. What I've always done, what does everyone else think is going to be a good idea? Or what do I do that's going to get me to the next thing at some point that I might want to do? I just thought, now I've got to actually listen to that advice. And so I did that.
Yeah, and I hope that really helps people who are listening who are in that position now. Maybe they've got that experience, like you said, and they think about, should I go and do something which I really care about or not? And it's good to hear that you had the support of your partner as well and people around you, so you could actually go and do what you are doing now. And can you tell us a bit about what ETFuels actually is, for the audience who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, sure. So ETFuels is a company that's seeking to produce green fuels. And these are green fuels that you can put into ships or into airplanes, for example, to decarbonise a ship or an airplane, reduce carbon emissions. And the way we are producing these green fuels is by using renewable electricity and then using that electricity to create a fuel called green hydrogen, which you can combine with other different chemicals to make these fuels. And I guess the thing we're doing that's somewhat different is basically the biggest reason or the biggest challenge in decarbonisation is to decarbonise, you need a lot of renewable energy. Electrify houses, electrify everything is renewable energy. Renewable energy is actually really cheap. And of course, there's loads of sun, there's loads of wind. We don't have a shortage of renewable energy. The biggest challenge you have is how do I get that electricity to where I need it? And the electricity grids that transport that electricity are just not fit for purpose for all this new electricity that's come online. So what we're doing basically is saying, screw the electricity grid. We're going to produce this fuel by simply turning that electricity into fuel at source. So our sites are basically large wind and solar farms that feed directly into a factory as opposed to going on the electricity grid and getting stuck. So that's what we're doing with ETFuels. It's a much cheaper way of producing green fuels at scale, basically.
Yeah, and it's quite obvious, hopefully, to the audience too, about what big impact that could make. And how has that journey been so far? So obviously you left Google, you joined Felix and your other co-founder, Anthony, I believe, to go and start this up. But that's a new experience for you, right? So how was that early steps of going about that?
So the start was really exciting. You have this huge potential, all this excitement about all these things you're going to do, and you're running around and everything's an opportunity, right? And then the next phase was, okay, and we sort of gave ourselves a window, we'll give ourselves, I can't remember, 6 months, and then we'll try and raise some cash once we've achieved some milestones. And the first 4 months were great, first 5 months, and then we're like, now we need to raise some cash. And getting that first check was so hard, so hard. And I remember the stress of it and why am I doing this? And then we raised a bit of cash. And obviously it's funny, I don't know, maybe it's just how things work, but once it's like buses, right? You start and then everyone piles in and then you've got enough and they're like, oh, well, and it's very lumpy, so it's very emotional. But we raised our seed capital and then we had another high. That's amazing. Now we've actually got some stuff we didn't pay ourselves salary at that point, so it wasn't like oh, we're done, but we could go and actually achieve some stuff. Then there was another high and do all this fun stuff, and then we're like, okay, now we need to go and do our next raise. And of course, next raise, like the rubber hits the road, and the stress of, are we going to get it? Are we going to get it? And the fundraising environment was quite tough. And then we did get funded. But I remember thinking after we got those funds the second time round, it was a very different experience. Like my sort of most lost day was after we just had the money hit the bank. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to do this now. So then sort of recovered from that. And now though, I think, so we're doing a series of projects. And now at the point where it's not just one project or one opportunity or one customer. We've got a few options that are bubbling through. Obviously still a long way to go. But I think once you have options as a founder, you can just sleep much better at night. Because you know that it'd be really bad if none of them work. I mean, famous last words. But I've always thought about how do I mitigate risk, but also create as much optionality as possible. And now I feel we're at the stage where we've done a decent job of getting some of the way there. And so I feel better about it. Less highs and less lows, just more stability.
What do you think some of the biggest lessons you've learned so far have been from kind of the new experience after being already an incredible leader, but now being a leader in the startup instead? What's the adjustments you've made or lessons you've learned?
Well, I mean, it's funny. So being a leader, right? So, I mean, I worked in large corporate environments where you have to, once I'd figured out I don't have to be a 60-year-old man, I still had to be a professional 40-year-old woman, right? And, Google's an amazing place to learn about leadership and how to manage teams and how to, interact with your peers. And so I did that and, I left Google feeling like, you know what? I remember a buddy of mine said to me, managing one person at Google is harder than managing 10 people somewhere else. And that was completely true. And so I'd managed quite a large team at Google and it was really hard and I'd learned so much. So I came out of Google, this much better rounded leader. And I went to go work for this startup with Anthony and Felix. And I basically reverted to being like a child again. Like literally it's sort of, people say about, new co-founders like being in a family. I mean, I literally was like a 14-year-old, like really moody and just like ups and downs. And it was funny because I think, I was the CEO, but we were 3 people unpaid, right? So not the big flashy. And I guess now we're a bigger team. We've employed people who aren't the founders. And I've had to just remember that I had to act as a professional and not as a petulant child, because you get so emotional with a startup. And it matters so much more and the dynamics are so much more personal with the people you're working with. So I've kind of now reverted to going back to being more like a corporate leader. It doesn't sound, hopefully not too boring, but yeah, I've tried to revert to that a bit more.
So one thing you've done as well, which I think people will be interested in, is that you've left the UK, right? So you've gone to live in Portugal and that's a new freedom. What was behind that decision? Was that something which you've been wanting to do for a while or?
Yeah, so that's a sulky husband. But I mean, so when I got married to my husband 12 years ago, we both had this plan that we were going to go and travel the world and grow. And I've always liked the idea of putting yourself into a challenging situation. And then, I don't know why, maybe it's sadistic, but I just like the idea of like, you grow through challenge, right? And I think, he wanted to go and see the world and a similar kind of mindset. So we'd always agreed we were going to travel. We didn't travel for a long time when we got married. We moved to Singapore with Rio. That was amazing for him, okay for me. And then we came back to the UK, we put this amazing plan on the shelf. And I guess, when we co-founded ETFuels, we could do that. Our plants are all over the place. They're not in a particular country. So in theory, could live anywhere. And I thought, what's actually important, right?
You mean your plant, like factory plants?
Our factories.
Yeah, I was like your plants.
Tulips are in, I was like, Our factories. And I just thought, it's been actually quite, so Waj, my other half, it's actually been really useful having somebody whose perspective is, look, okay, you're doing a job, right? And you may think it's a very important job, but actually what's really important is what's going to be a great place to live for our family? What's going to be a great place for us to, not just be doing the same thing every day, but to be in an environment where we have to grow and adapt and just, be more than just a job. And so Portugal's actually been an amazing move for us because, of course it's lovely weather, great lifestyle, amazing for the kids, but it's just been a reminder that there is more to life than work, which has been super important.
Before we go to quick fire questions, what's the dream?
I guess from a work perspective, the dream is to get one of these plants up and running, decarbonising at industrial hyperscale, and still have my mum, my dad, my kids and my husband all talking to me.
Awesome. So if we go to quick fire questions now. So who are 3 British stations that you'd love to shout out that you think the audience should be paying attention to?
Yeah. So my first one is Mazar Masood. He is the head of Edelman, which is a sort of communications company in the Middle East. Amazing guy. He basically set up everything for COP for the Middle East, and he's just been incredibly helpful to me in terms of facilitating introductions and just being an amazing, amazing guy. My second is Julia Lala Maharaja. I met Julia on a board of a charity that I used to sit on, VSO. She's done some pioneering work in the FGM space, but more broadly, and just an incredible lady, a visionary, and has an amazing ability to bring people together and listen. And my third is an ex-colleague from Google, Sohair Khan. She's doing some really exciting work in combining AI and design. And I just think the ability of someone to take such a complex sort of concept around AI and combine that with something creative is just super exciting. And also a lovely, lovely, lovely person.
They all sound awesome. So if people want to hear more about you or what you're up to in the future or ETFuels, where should they go?
So I do all my humble bragging on LinkedIn and our website, www.et-fuels.com.
And is there anything you need help with?
Lots. We're always looking for great engineers. So we have career postings on our website for electrical engineers, process engineers, anyone who is in that space. Would love to talk to you.
So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.